Living my bucolic life, free every city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Well, I have every intention of finishing this skirt in this episode, so I'm pleased about that, but I want to show you the skirt on my second, more squishy dress form. I had been using it on my store mannequin one over here, which is very hard, very flat fronted. This one is a little more curvy. She has my little paunch in the front, okay? So here is my dilemma. When I cut this overlap, I took my center front and measured straight over and went straight down, okay? Which is fine in general, but when I put it on my curvy dress form, and I did not see this when I had my mock-up on my other one, because it's curvier in the front, this is actually pulling more towards the center. It's not hanging straight. If it was going straight down, it would be right here, okay? Now at this point, there is absolutely nothing I can do about that, all right? I just want to make that clear. I am not going to try to fix it. And honestly, to someone who does not know the game plan, it's not going to be a problem. But to me, maybe to you, if I'm ever doing this again, I'm going to do something different. Let me show you. I have just a long piece of elastic stuck into her with a stick pin where this overlap, I wanted it to start. And you can see, hanging it straight down, it's coming where you would think the edge should be in order for it to lay straight and not at an angle. So in the book, when it has a picture of her and it just says, this is to figure out how far you want your overlap to be, there's more to it than just that. At that point, that's to figure out how far that overlap needs to be cut all the way to. So if it was me, what I would do is make up a mock-up of just the standard skirt, the front, the back, no overlaps, none of that stuff, just the front and back to make sure that the standard part of the skirt will fit. Then place this over here, wherever you want it to be, and at the point that you have it pinned up, draw a line on your mock-up skirt, tracing exactly where this is, okay? That will give you the edge line of where your underlap should go to. You will also need to add, you know, a little seam allowance to that because it is folded in and everything. But that'll give you the angle so that when you have it finally made up, it will be completely straight and not want to veer in towards the middle, kind of like mine. I'm going to leave mine. I think it's pretty. I'm not going to worry about it, but for the future, that's what I will do. Okay, so while I have her on here, and because this is not lining up completely flat, this is actually a good thing that I had a chance to fix all of this, because I would have sewn it completely flat over here, and that would not have worked out. So what I'm going to be doing is basically stitching it closed from up here to right at this point. This is the point where my little square is, okay? I'm not going to go the 10 inches that she was suggesting or anything like that. I'm just going to go to this point, and having the dress up on my dress form like this is giving me the right location to pin that, okay? All Alright, so before we go any further, I just want to show you really quickly, I have my skirt sewed from this point up, and I just hand sewed it, duplicating some of the stitches that were in my top stitching from when I put my little trim on. So if you look inside, it's not the neatest thing in the world, but it does the job and it's going to hold it together. Okay, so with that, we're going to get started on putting this waistband together. And this waistband goes together differently than just about anything else. So I am going back to my waistband piece from my original pattern because it does have all of the little markings on here that I need. And she says that you need to make the waistband 1.5 inches to 2 inches longer than the waist measurement. So to me that means center back to center back plus 2 inches is what I want. So she wants you to use something like this. This is a grosgrain ribbon. It is a 1 inch, 7/8 inch wide. 7/8 inch wide grosgrain ribbon. So basically the width of my waistband is going to be a seam allowance plus the ribbon plus another seam allowance. Okay, and so since this is 7/8 right here, I'm going to, let me just line it up on my grid here. Okay, so if this is 7/8 and I need 2 seam allowances, I'm going to cut my waistband about 2¼ inches. That's going to give me a little extra based on her game plan, but if it's too wide, I can always trim it down. If it's too narrow, I'm stuck and I have to start over. Okay, so I have my strip. I'm folding it in half and with my heat erasable pen, marking that point, which is the center front. And from there, I can place my little pattern piece over it, matching my pattern center front here, which will give me the position for this dot is the side seam. Over off camera, over here is a dot that is center back, and so on and so forth. Claire, of course, wants us to thread mark these. I am not. I don't think that that's going to make any difference at this point. So I'm using my pen. Now, what I have to do now is using my grosgrain ribbon as the interfacing. I need to place it in a position. Typically it would be in the middle. Hang on one second. This thing is fraying. I'm going to seal up the ends of my grosgrain just so that they don't want to unravel on me. Okay. So I am going to mark my 5/8 inch seam allowance on here. I think that that would be a good thing to mark because that's going to give me the baseline to place my ribbon on. So say I draw my 5/8 here, then I know that my ribbon is going to go right on top of that and go from center back line to center back line. And I'm just going to put a couple little pins just to temporarily hold it there as I work my way down. Okay, so I've gotten all the way down to the end here, and I can see here's my marked 5/8 inch line. This is my center back. So I was able to make sure that my grosgrain ribbon comes to the right spot. Now, in the spirit of what is Claire saying to do and what is the ultimate goal of it, what she would like me to do right now is with a big fat basting thread, come back and make diagonal stitches down the whole thing just so I can pull them out another step down the road. In the spirit of Marie sees what Claire wants to do, but she's going to do it her own darn way because that's how obstinate she really is, I am going to throw a little bit of stitch witchery between here and pat it down so that that way it's going to hold it very securely as I fold the edges over. I'm waiting for lightning to strike me from above right now, but I'm going to go ahead and move this to my ironing board and do that really quickly. Okay, so I have my piece of stitch witchery here that I am laying right where my ribbon is going to be placed. Just laying it nicely there. Now I'm going to put my ribbon over on top of it. And I hope my iron is turned on. And wait for my iron to heat up, apparently. Just a moment. Okay, so now I am just pressing it a little bit at a time as I go, which is fusing it to the fabric and also erasing my marks, because we don't want those marks to show. Okay, so the next step is going to involve hand stitching the edge down, mitering a corner and everything like that. So to help me along, I'm actually going to go ahead and press these edges in on the side to get that crease, and also fold them down along the top. Now you can see the side that is 5/8 is shorter than the other side. This side is actually going to be the seam allowance that I sew to the skirt, but I will be able to trim it. It's a lot easier, like I said, to trim off the extra than to try to make something that's too narrow work for you. Okay, so I will be stitching this part by hand, but I wanted to show you what she wants when she says to miter a corner. If I draw this line, this is this seam line, and this way, this is this seam line. Okay, it's easier to see with the ink. What she wants you to do is cut from the corner up to this point, and then one of these edges, cut out a triangle. All right, and then butt these two edges together and fold it over. And then fold this side up. And what that's going to do is, it's not really like a 45-degree miter, but it's in enough that it's not going to be visible from the outside. That's what she calls a mitered corner. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over here where there's this line and this line. So I'm cutting to this corner and cutting that one. Butting these two together, folding them in, butted together like this, and then fold this up like that. Okay, so it seems like it doesn't matter which triangle you've cut out. I've done it both ways, and it seems to be about the same on both sides. So with these two corners just kind of held together in place, I am getting a needle and thread in a matching color, because I don't intend on pulling this out. And I'm just going to be taking, she says baste it, but I'm just going to call it more like running stitches, you know, not as big as a basting stitch, but enough to come down, pick up a thread on the right side, and come back up. It's still going to be fairly invisible. Now when I get up to these mitered corners, I'm going to do a little extra work. First, let me just grab a thread here. And I'm going to need to come down this side and stitch this little side in, so there's no chance it wants to come back open. Kind of like that. So that little side is all stitched in right there. Okay, so now that I'm back up top, just actually I'm going to move in so I'm at least 1/8 of an inch in. Just start doing my little running stitches again, which is, I'm trying to get it so that I come on this side, maybe pick up one little thread, and then bounce back to the other side. Okay, so when I'm all done, I should have both sides folded in and one side completely stitched down. All right, so I have my waistband done to her standards at this point. And before I can sew this on, I want to trim all of this up here. It's just too big. So what I'm going to do is I've got my tape basted on, and I'm going to use that tape as a guide, and I am going to basically cut, if I line up the bottom of my seam guide with the bottom of my tape and put a mark up here at the top, that should be about 5/8 of an inch, and it is. And so that is where I am going to be cutting straight across right there. It seems really scary to do that right now, but that's what I'm going to be doing all the way across so that I have a more manageable top area to work into my waistband. All right, so I have my edge cut here, and I'm going to go off script a little bit and run a zigzag stitch along this edge. What I'm hoping that's going to do is, one, keep it for sure from wanting to come out, because I basically have this basted on stitch and I'm not feeling 100% confident with anything at this point. But I'm thinking if I can run a zigzag over this, it's going to compress it more, which will make it flatter inside of my waistband, and also it'll keep it more secure. So right now I am just clipping it on, and I'm matching up my center fronts and everything, and I'm checking my seam allowance below this ribbon is actually 3/4 of an inch, so it's a little bit wider, but that's okay because I've got a lot of stuff to put in there. Now, because I have my twill tape as a stay tape in there, my waistband thankfully has held its shape, and I think that running a zigzag stitch over the top is helpful at this stage. It just feels a lot more manageable and flat and pulled together. So I'm recommending that. So to start sewing, I'm going to put this under my machine. You have to open up this edge here. So you got your miter stitched, opening up this edge and backing my machine in there as much as possible to start stitching right here. And I'm not going to stitch on the ribbon, I'm going to stitch just below the ribbon, right along here. And if I stick this through, I can see that that is going to push it just probably about 1/8 of an inch below my stay tape. So I think I should be okay, but I'm going to take it extremely slow, do a few inches, make sure everything's right, do a few inches, because I want to try, as I'm doing everything else, to try to flatten this out so I don't have any puckers in here. So that's the goal. Let me go give it a try and I'll show you how it turns out. All right, so it is sewn on, and I think it's as unpucker free as I can get it, honestly. With the thickness of this fabric, there are some little gathered looking areas, but not like big ridges. I mean, not like overlap, but just extra fullness, you know what I mean? But I looked back on some of the pictures of some of the other skirts, and some of those that are made at Chanel do have the same thing, like here. Don't know if you can see, but you can see the gathers up here even, and this is a really nice velvet skirt. So, you know, sometimes that happens and I'm not going to stress about it. So before I can close up my waistband, I need to trim some of this bulk out, because that's a whole lot of thickness. If I just push everything up there, look at that, that's like 3/8 of an inch of thickness in there that I have to take out. So what I'm going to do is grade this thing, and I can't tell, I'm kind of stressing about it. What I'm going to do first is pull off this tape. I think if I pull off the tape, I will be able to see everything a lot clearer, and it has done its job, and it's done its job very well, actually. I'm very, very pleased with what this little 1/4 inch of twill tape has been able to do. So now I am taking the skirt part here, this is the one that I zigzagged and everything, which was good, and I am taking it down to about 1/4 inch, like that, carefully all the way around. And then I'm going to take this piece, which is part of the waistband, and I'm just going to take about 1/8 of an inch off of that so that these two are staggered. All right, so I have it graded. What I'm going to do right now is go to the ironing board and press these straight up, just to try to get everything so it wants to go in this direction before I go on to the next step. All right, so I've pressed them and it doesn't look bad. It really doesn't look bad. I'm satisfied with it. I'm not elated, but I'm satisfied with it, you know. What I have done is, after I pressed it on this side, I haven't done the other side yet, but on this side I came back and I made some stitches just to hold everything kind of snugly together to make it play nice while I'm working on it. And what I have to do at this point is put a coat hook on. And the coat hooks are going to be placed so that they should be invisible from the outside. I wish I had white ones, unfortunately, and I thought I did. I'm going to have to take one more peek, but unfortunately I can only find the black ones right now. She mentioned using 2. I'm hoping she means 2, just like one hook and one eye, because there's no way I could put 2 different coat hooks on my one tiny little 7/8 inch waistband. I think that's going to be fine. So I need to come over on this side and again make all of those little stitches just to, you know, cinch everything in so it's going to lay nicely while I put the eye over on this side. So I'm actually doing a improvised ladder stitch type of a stitch, but doing just a little catch stitch seemed too wimpy to me. Okay, so you can see they're just basically up and down stitches, and that seems to be holding it pretty well. So I don't even know what you call it. I'm calling it a bizarre ladder stitch, but I'm just going up, catching some, coming down in here, catching some, and it's cinching it together so that my waistband feels a lot more pulled together. Okay, so now I'm going to sew on my hook and eye. I have my waistband all stitched together like that. And I want the edge of my hook, she says to put it 1/8 of an inch in. But I need to stitch very securely these eyelets down here and also around the major hook, just to do a few tacks around that too. I made some pretty big and ugly stitches to hold this in place because I wanted to make sure it was really secure. So I actually grabbed big old hunks of fabric from all over the place because I'm going to be putting a little lining band on top of it like this, so that won't even show in the final product. But if you want to see big old honkin' stitches. So I've got my coat hook, and the way that it is, it's going to hold it together really securely back there. Again, this little zipper should be popping into its pocket like that. So actually I can see, even when I'm really pulling it apart, I can barely see it. So I might want to even stick it in just a little hair. I think I'm going to move this hook in just because when I'm really pulling it apart, I can barely see it. I don't want to see it. And that's at rest, and that is under strain, you know? Is it a big difference? Not a lot, but it's easy to fix right now, so I'm going to cut this, the loop side out, move it 1/8 of an inch in this way, just to be 100% safe, and then I'll go ahead and make my lining band. So I've made another band, and even though I use my bias tape maker, I cut my fabric on the straight of grain, and it is just a 2-inch strip of my lining fabric that I sprayed it with starch and then ran it through my bias tape maker again and pressed it. And what I'm going to do is just lay it along the top here, and I am going to stitch it on with little felling stitches by hand, so that from the very top it's going to be invisible from the outside, but it's going to give a really nice edge. Then I have it's 1 inch long, and my waistband is slightly shorter than 1 inch, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is come in and just catch it down here. And it's actually kind of nice that it's a little longer than my actual waistband, because that way it's going to hide all of these, you know, gathering stitches and everything else that's up there, and it should give me a nice smooth edge. So I'm just going to take my time, get my matching thread, and just start making these little stitches. Good morning and welcome to another day of working on this project. I had to leave yesterday before I finished doing my waistband, getting all the felling stitches in, and I just left quickly. And I came in this morning, I couldn't believe what a mess my room was in. So I spent the first 10 minutes putting stuff away because it was like chaos all over my table. And now I'm feeling really hopeful that we're going to get this done, because really all that's left at this point is finishing the waistband and doing the hem, final pressing, and that's it. So we can do this. So let me tip it down and we'll just get going. All right, so if you remember, I have this side, I have the lining I'm working on putting on the inside of my waistband, and I just have it slipped underneath the hook over here, okay? And I'm working all the way down around towards the eye part, which is over here. And at first I had it folded under like that, but I don't like how all of this out here is showing. And I have this eye set in pretty far, because when I hook it together like this, when you put it under pressure, it's going to pull out flat, okay? And that's what I want. I want it to look flat under pressure. So it has to be stuck in. So what I'm actually going to do is have to figure out a way, once I get down to this point, to either slice it and wrap it around that hook, or somehow be able to toggle it over. But we'll get there soon. Just wanted to show you the waistband is slightly wider. The waistband lining, I should say, is slightly wider than my actual waistband, so that way it is covering up all of the little unsightly stitches and gathers and everything like that, so I can have a nice smooth edge in here. And I kind of like that. It's nice. All right, so I am up to this point, and I'm thinking the best option for me is actually to slice in this way and wrap it around, because I have extra at the top and the bottom in that fold that I can use to stitch it back together. So we will see how this works. If it doesn't, I will have to redo the entire thing, but we're not going to go there. It's going to be fine. So if I slice it like this, get a little extra piece I need to trim off, and wrap it around like this. Then I'm going to do my best just to stitch it together. Actually, I might get a little piece of stitch witchery, put it right there, and fuse this to it just to hold it really securely while I'm stitching it. I'm going to go do that really quickly. Alright, so I have wrapped it around and fused this part down with just a little piece of stitch witchery. And now with this pin, I'm trying, sounds like there's an airplane landing outside. Huh. I'm trying to just gently tuck all these loose threads in here, like that, so that they're not going to want to protrude out. But I think that looks a whole lot better than just having the lining end right there and all of that exposed. So first thing, I'm going to just go around the entire outside of this lining. Try to pull it down where it matches the other parts. I know that stitch witchery is definitely not in the Claire Shaeffer handbook, but it does have its place in really helping to secure things temporarily. So I think of it as like super pins, you know? I wouldn't use it as a permanent fix, but it definitely is fabulous for holding things exactly where you want them while you're sewing. All right, it is done. So I have it all finished on the inside. This is what I ended up doing on my eye side when I got done just going around the edges. I came in and I did tiny little blanket stitch like things here connecting the two sides, and then came around Made a couple more little like buttonhole kind of stitches on this side with a little knot to secure it, and I think that that's going to be fine. I did not use frayed check or anything like that because that just felt like it would be wrong. So now I have the little pocket at the top of the zipper where the little zipper tab will fit into nicely. I have my massive coat hook at the top. And yeah, so when it's pulled, it's gonna even out here, but when it's not, it might look a little bit bumpy. But you know, that's the price you pay for when it's just on the hanger. So now let's get started on the hem. All right, so if you remember a long time ago when I was marking these, I said this bottom one was going to be my cutting line. And I still stand by that. And that means that right now is the time that I actually need to cut it. So very carefully, I am just going to start slicing along this stitched line right here. Okay, so now my cutting line is cut off here. And if you also remember, when I did all the quilting, my skirt shrunk up 3/8 of an inch. So my actual skirt fold line for the hem is going to be 3/8 of an inch longer than what this mark is. So before I do anything else, I'm going to go around on the inside and just kind of gently mark this so that I have a guideline for my interfacing. So now that I have this line marked, I'm going to come back in here and just pull out all of this basting marking threads here because I don't need them anymore and they will just get in my way. And I believe this is the last marking thread that I have to pull out, so yay to that, huh? So once I have this out, I need to interface it. She suggests organza. I'm actually going to use my Wiggin. I think it's a similar weight. This is already cut, it's already on the bias, and this is what it's made for. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, my Wiggin is 2 inches wide, but she recommends a fold to give it extra oomph at the hemline. So I'm actually going to fold it up like this and place that folded edge right on my marked edge here. So I'm folding it up about 1/2 inch so that my Wiggin is about 1.5 inches tall when all is said and done, okay? Okay, so this is the underlap side where I'm just going to get started placing it. Let me pull this marking thread out really quickly here. Okay, so with that gone, I'm going to start out by placing my folded, bias cut, non-fusible Wiggin down here, and I'm going to start it out right at the edge of this fold, like this. And I will be coming back and hand stitching it invisibly along this edge. After I get it, you know, roughly pinned into place. All right, so now I have it pinned all the way across on my marked hem fold line. And with my matching thread, see, matches so well, I'm going to stitch the very bottom edge of this to my fabric invisibly. All right, so basically I'm just going to, when I'm stitching this, come up, grab a hair at the edge of the Wiggin like this, come back down, pick up a thread or so in my fabric on that fold line, and then come back up. Just bounce back and forth that way, all the way across here so that the very edge of this fold line is lining up with my marked fold line here on my fabric. All right, over here at the ironing board, I have this stitched on, and I just gave it a really quick press just to, one, erase my marks and also set my little stitches. And now what I'm going to do is fold up my hem at that same edge that my interfacing is at, and just give it a nice press. And when I need to, I can come and put down my clapper to try to get a nice edge there. Okay, so I've had this pressed, but there's a lot of places I need to trim before I can stitch it in. Like, for example, this is my center back, and I have a lot of bulk here. So the first thing I'm going to do is clip my seam allowance almost about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam line at the fold line, so that that's going to fold easier. And once I have it cut in like that, I'm going to come in this way and trim out some of that extra bulk here in this back seam. Okay, so that's going to be a whole lot flatter and easier to hold. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a little clip right there, just so it can be training itself to sit nice and flat. Then everything else is very, very flat because there are no side seam lines. Because there are no side seam lines, I can just get this all the way over towards the front. And then when we get to the front, there's some issues that we need to take care of at the corners of these laps, and there's two different things going on, one with the fringe and one without the fringe. So at this point right here, I need to somewhat miter this, take bulk out and miter it so that it's not going to want to pop out and show. And I actually, I can open it up enough. Okay, so just like before, what she wants you to do is cut a triangle out, cutting from the corner. Pretend this is folded out. So from that corner, if this was folded out, I cut a diagonal from the corner out here to the corner here. And bringing this side in, so those two butt together, but don't overlap. I think that's the key, so that there's no extra bulk because they're not overlapping. And then I fold that up, and it's mitered in just enough. It's in no danger of showing out here. And there at the most, it has a couple layers of fabric, but you skip at least one layer by making sure that they're not overlapping. So that is held in place there. So the first thing I need to do is actually, I need my fringe to come loose here because I don't want my fringe to be doubled down there. So I'm loosening it to the point that I hit that fold line, which is right about here. And then I'm going to bring it in off to the side. I'm not clipping it because I don't want a raw edge down here, but I'm just kind of angling it in, if that makes sense. And this is my own interpretation. I don't actually see this in hers, but it makes sense to me. So I'm just going to pop a little pin there just for now to hold it. Okay. Now out here, it's going to be the same thing we did on the other one, where I'm cutting from this corner out here. And the point that I'm going for is, there's my fold line, okay, where this mark is. I'm going to the point where my fold line intersects with my folded edge. I'm going to clip from here up there. Okay, so then I have that triangle. Then I'm going to come down and cut this. So butting these two together like this, holding my fringe up and bending the whole thing upward. So that way I have my tiny little mitered edge right there. My fringe is being held in like that. You put a clip right here and right here. All right, so I have all of my invisible running stitches done, which is going to hold this nice and securely. And I wanted to show you, I also stitched this corner. which you can't see because my thread blends in so well, but trust me, I stitched it in really securely there too. Excuse me. So now, final segment, what I need to do is tuck my lining under, and I have just arbitrarily decided that I want my lining to be about 1/4 inch higher than the fabric. I've seen a lot of pictures where other skirts, it's actually just 1/8 of an inch in. But that's, I feel like in case there ever is a little bit of wobble up here, that's a little too close for comfort for the bottom hem for me. So I'm going to leave it like this. So I'm going to go through, pin it, and then do the same kind of felling stitches that I do along all of these other sides and stitch that in place. Okay, so I think she's done. This is how the bottom ended up looking. You know, it's nicely stitched on. And time to talk about what we've learned today with this skirt and everything. And the first thing, hang on, let me get a chair and scoot down here. So talking about the things we've learned with this project. First of all, dealing with the Claire Shaeffer books. I think that the best way to do it is not take them as a step-by-step guide, but more of a read the entire thing and get the feeling of the types of steps and the types of process they do and why. Because, well, as you saw with all of the basting and stitching and thread marking and everything, some of those seem very redundant and actually not that productive from my point of view. You know, everyone has a different perspective, and just for me, some things seem just taking time and busyness just for the sake of it, okay? Just to say it's all by hand. And there's a place for that, but if there is a easier way that might result in a stronger garment, I want to know that. So she gives some good ideas, and one of the ideas that I really do like is that you don't actually cut your piece exactly the size it is, so that as you work on it, if fabric changes like that, the lining got hunched up some when I was doing the quilting, the fabric itself, you know, so that you don't have the final cut done. You can adjust that as you go, and it's not a tragedy. And I like that. I also like how the lining is put on with the quilting. I like that too. I think that gives a really nice attachment method, okay? What I don't like about this skirt is this wrap. And several reasons, but it does add a whole different layer of difficulty and fiddliness that you would not have if it was just a plain straight skirt. And one of my main problems actually with this is that the placement of this wrap, the way that the overlap is going to be on the under part, is entirely, in my opinion, dependent on the roundness of the belly that's underneath it. If it's a very, very flat belly, like if I put this skirt flat down on my table, it's going to look like this is sewn totally wrong and wonky. But when I put it on a dress form that has a rounder belly, it lays right, okay? And so I can make this and make my best guess on how it's supposed to fit. But unless you actually have the final person standing right there, the placement of this overlap that has to be stitched up here, or else, you know, everything is visible, could be wrong. So there's that. I will not be doing this again. You know, sometimes I say, if I will not. I will just make plain, standard, straight pencil skirt. But I will use the quilting method. I will use an alternative pattern, getting rid of the side seam. I like that. I will use some of her method for using the coat hook up here. I'm not too sure about the zipper, putting in the zipper by hand. It looks nice, but I don't know that it looks so much nicer than putting it in my machine. You know, that's debatable. So there's pros and cons. I think that right now I'm satisfied with it the way that it is, and I'm ready to move forward with the jacket, and just thought I would share that with you. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.